I have variables here. I have the, and this, for each row here, the corresponding variable is the current target. You either have a regression tree or a classification tree. Now this shows me the number of nodes that the optimal tree has. And that shows me the relative, the accuracy, basically. So what I see here is that that variable can be predicted using two-node tree with 100% accuracy. Now suppose you have a variable called sales amount. Suppose you have another variable that indicates whether sales amount is above or below a certain threshold. Now they might be separate in the data set. They may even have different names. But this battery will immediately nail that kind of situation because you will know that that variable can be nicely predicted by something else. You just pull out the tree, look into the variable importance list or tree structure, and you immediately realize what's going on. The same thing goes for these variables. But notice that some of these variables require fairly large trees to reach the point of accuracy. Instead of 2 nodes, I have 300 nodes. And those are the things that would allow you to extract pieces of information, like whether you have power transforms in your data set. I mean, something predicts something else in a perfect nonlinear fashion. But you'll see it here. The tree itself might be convoluted and overly complicated, but the fact that you have 100% accuracy already tells you a lot about what's going on. And we've managed to crack a lot of data sets, especially when you get to these competitions. All of a sudden you realize that there is a great deal of fancy engineering that went behind all kinds of variables in those data sets, and you can quickly identify what some of those relationships are. There is another side of the story here. If you look at the variables that have the lowest possible predictive models, then you've essentially identified unique kind of singletons of variables that are so unique compared to everyone else. So they're basically independent components of anything else that you have in the data set. Now remember, the curse of statistics and modeling in general. If you want to do theory, everybody assumes that everything is independent. But when you go to real-life applications, it's never the case. Well, it never really is the case. You always have dependencies. And that kind of sheds some light on what is really going on. Now, in fact, it's not really a curse. In some ways, it could be turned as a blessing, because if we really had all these variables as truly independent, the curse of dimensionality would kill it all. But in reality, a lot of variables are intermixed. Or you may think that you have 500 dimensions. In reality, you have only 30 or 40. Everything is concentrated on some kind of low-dimensional manifold. Okay, so we have that. Now, how can we further summarize that information? Think about it. Each variable has the associated accuracy prediction and the associated variable importance list. So you know that, say, that variable can be predicted with 24% accuracy using the list of other variables. Data-driven approach does not rely on linearities, does not rely on any assumptions. So if something is predictable in either perfectly linear or non-linear sense, that information is already there, and that information is already in the variable importance list. So what you can do, you can picture, say, for the case of 100 variables, a 100 by 100 matrix of generalized dependency measures. So for each variable, you'll know that there are some other related variables that can be used to explain what you have. And of course, you have to scale by accuracies, you have to scale by reported importance values, and so on. But once you've done it, what happens in the end, you can solve a third challenge, which is identifying groups of related variables. And in this case, I'm kind of trying to elaborate a little bit more on what I've just said. In this case, we have 171 models. We have variable importance. We have the overall model accuracy. We arrange everything into one big matrix. And now we have something that's similar to correlation matrices, except that it's a lot more general, and the entries are limited to 0-1 range. And another difference from the conventional correlation matrix is that in in a linear sense, you could talk about positive correlation versus negative. So you have +1, 0, and -1. The only difference between +1 and -1 is the direction. As you go into a nonlinear domain, direction makes no sense because you could have nonlinearity going either way you go. You could have a rising trend followed by diminishing trend. You could have all sorts of things. So therefore, we're kind of collapsing these both extremes onto one positive one-side range. So we're talking about dependency versus independency, and that information is communicated within our matrix as a 0, 1 set of values. Well, to make a long story short, there is a powerful technique known as the multidimensional scaling. And if you've never discovered it before, look at the back of your road atlas. Or let me put it this way. I come from the Ukraine, and I can give you a table that lists 25 major cities of that country. And in the matrix, it shows the pairwise distances between those cities. So I can tell you, I mean, this is the only information I have. Will you be able to reconstruct the map of the Ukraine? And the answer is yes. How? By running multidimensional scaling. It takes into account matrix of pairwise distances or proximities and reconstructs the cloud of points, of course allowing for some deformations and dimensionalities, problems and so on, to reconstruct the original map. Well, if I do that on this set of 171 variables, it all nicely collapses into this little map where each dot represents individual variables. And the closer the two dots are together, the higher the mutual occurrence of these variables in those dependency models that I have. And if you study these maps, you'll realize I've kind of identified a number of different sectors there, and then decided to explain, like the green box surrounds the customer care call characteristics, the yellow box has all kinds of activity, and so on and so forth. Again, why are we doing that? Because we're understanding better what kind of variables we have. Now, furthermore, it gives us a way to study some of these phenomena into a kind of a more targeted approach. For example, you could take all of these variables and run some kind of SVD or principal component or factor analysis decomposition to reduce the number of variables from 30 down to maybe 2 or 3 representative dimensions. So you can explain it and you can use it as part of your models. And it's a lot easier in the data mining context to build models that are based on these subsets of, say, relatively independent predictors and representing different pieces of information as opposed to throwing them all and relying on the software picking one or the other piece. So it's something along those lines. Okay, so that gives us some of the ideas on the clusters of variables and the associated information there. Now let me talk about the Asian KDD 2007 challenge, which is a challenge kind of ran in one day. Dan called me in the morning, said, Kel, we have this interesting data set. Why don't you spend some time working on it, and we'll submit the results. So I got the results by the end of the day. And what I will do here, I'll kind of quickly highlight some of the steps that were involved as part of that challenge. And there were a lot of kind of data prep, all the usual stuff. The challenge itself was examining the potential for offering home loans to a population of credit card holders by studying individuals who have a credit card and a mortgage with the card issuers. This is some kind of a cross-sell situation. We have the historical records of 40,000 customers. There was a whole variety of variables included: customer demographics, history, income category, summaries of credit card use, as well as all these conventional pieces of information. It was an interesting data set. As far as I recall, there were quite a few high-level categorical variables that were processed the way that I just talked about just several 15 minutes ago.